Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are breaking down this massive, truly fascinating intersection of comic book history and environmental philosophy. We're going to do this by diving into a really brilliant academic thesis. So, we are looking at the Man of Steel through a completely different lens than you're probably used to. Prepare to have your perspective on the world's most famous superhero entirely shifted as we explore his 79-year publication history.
It is the ultimate plot hole in superhero mythology, right? I mean, we're talking about a character who has dismantled the world's nuclear arsenals, stopped cosmic threats, and literally turned back time. Yet, when it comes to the slow-moving, existential threat of global energy consumption and climate change, the Man of Tomorrow does absolutely nothing to permanently fix it. So, why is that?
Okay, let's dive into this, because it's wild. Superman is at his very core a living solar battery. According to the source material we're analyzing today, he can metaphysically hyper-metabolize solar radiation. Basically, he absorbs it and then somehow creates more of that energy inside his own body, completely defying the scientific laws of conservation. Theoretically, if Superman were periodically plugged into a powerful enough thermonuclear reactor, he could provide an infinite amount of clean, sustainable energy to the entire planet. Honestly, he could end the global energy crisis and all the pollution that comes with it in approximately a single second.
Our exploration today is grounded in this absolutely fascinating 2017 eco-critical thesis by Justin Hart Crary from Marshall University. It's titled Planet Superman, and this paper asks a brilliant question. By constantly bailing humanity out of the consequences of our own destructive actions, is Superman actually antagonistic to the environment? Like, does his constant interference prevent us from learning how to sustain our own planet? But to really understand why this incredibly powerful fictional being has these seemingly arbitrary limitations, we can't just look at the comic book pages. We've got to zoom out. We have to look at the real-world history of the comic book industry itself, because the fictional limitations placed on Superman, they're a direct result of real-world historical pressures and editorial mandates.
Let's walk through this timeline for a second. Over more than 7 decades, DC Comics built a massive multiverse. To keep Superman relevant and, to fix continuity errors caused by decades of different writers, DC's effectively rebooted their entire universe multiple times. We see these distinct eras: the Golden Age starting in 1938, the Silver Age in '56, the Bronze Age in 1970, and then the Modern Age kicking off in 1985 with a massive storyline called Crisis on Infinite Earths. Every single one of these reboots changed who Superman was to fit the era.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Superman's priorities were heavily influenced by whatever was happening in the real world at that time. Think about it. The Golden Age Superman, born from the Great Depression and World War II, was heavily focused on American nationalism and capitalistic ventures. Contrast that with the Bronze Age Superman of the 1970s and 80s. Suddenly, he's dealing with complex political scandals, social issues, and a much more nuanced world. The character is entirely at the mercy of editorial control and societal values.
But the biggest flex of editorial control didn't even come from a writer's room. It actually came from a psychiatrist named Frederick Wertham. In 1954, Wertham published a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which claimed that comic books were a primary cause of juvenile delinquency. And this book sparked a massive public outcry, leading straight to the formation of the United States Senate Subcommittee to investigate comic books. The industry was, quite frankly, terrified of government regulation.
Section 1. The Precedent, the Comics Code Authority.
So to avoid government censorship, publishers created this self-regulating censorship body, and its rules were incredibly strict. You couldn't have excessive violence. You couldn't even use the words horror or crime in the title. But most importantly for our Superman paradox, the rules mandated that good must always triumph over evil in every single instance, and you could never, ever portray law enforcement or the government negatively. This basically made comic narratives entirely toothless, forcing criminals to always be neatly punished by a completely infallible justice system.
To really grasp how damaging this was to grand storytelling, ask yourself this rhetorical question. What if the Comics Code Authority had existed during the Golden Age, right in the middle of World War II? How on earth would a superhero comic handle a real-world, complex, systemic evil under these strict rules?
Well, the answer is totally absurd. Adolf Hitler would have been captured by a superhero in issue number 1. Because the rules demanded that good must immediately triumph and criminals must be punished, supreme evils would just be defeated instantly. It completely negates the terrible, systemic threat that villains actually pose in the real world. It ruins the story because it offers an impossibly easy fix to a deeply complicated problem.
Notice the stark contrast here. By the 1960s, the real world was dealing with messy, complicated realities, civil unrest, corrupt systems, and a public realizing that authority wasn't always right. Meanwhile, under the Comics Code Authority, comics were projecting this bizarre fantasy of infallible justice and perfectly easy answers. The readers recognized that a neat one-issue wrap-up was a foregone conclusion, which is exactly why the CCA eventually failed and lost all its power.
Section 2. Zooming back in. Superman's environmental band-aid.
So now that we've established how writers historically limited their characters, look at what Superman is actually permitted to do today. He's dismantled nuclear devices. He's stopped dictators like Hitler and Stalin in the early comics. He constantly flies in to stop earthquakes, floods, and immediate natural disasters. But he is never allowed to provide sustainable, clean energy. There's a massive tension here between what the character is physically capable of doing and what the writers actually allow him to do. Superman is permitted to be a band-aid for immediate symptoms, but he is never allowed to be the systemic cure for the disease.
Which brings us back to the core of Query's thesis, which utilizes eco-criticism. This is the interdisciplinary study of literature and the environment. Through this academic lens, we have to reevaluate Superman's nearly 80-year history. He has spent decades prioritizing the saving of human lives, but we have to step back and ask, at what potential expense to the Earth's natural ecosystems?
It leads to this incredibly deep philosophical question: does saving humanity actually make Superman nature's enemy? Think about it. If he is constantly stepping in to protect us from the natural disasters that our own climate-altering behavior causes, he's shielding us from the consequences of our actions. By being humanity's ultimate safety net, he might just be perpetuating our ecologically destructive practices.
And the thesis draws a direct, chilling parallel here. Look at Earth's current path: resource exploitation, endless energy consumption, and pollution. Now look at the fate of Superman's home planet, Krypton. In most comic incarnations, Krypton wasn't just destroyed by some random cosmic fluke. No, it exploded because of its inhabitants' constant exploitation and excavation of their own planet's natural resources. Earth is on the exact same trajectory.
Section 3. The conclusion. Waiting on a Superman.
This brings our narrative arc to its climax. Under an eco-critical lens, Superman isn't actually saving the world at all. Because writers artificially limit him to only treating the symptoms of our destructive nature, rather than providing the systemic cure he is absolutely fully capable of, Superman is actually enabling our own self-destruction. He is simply delaying the inevitable annihilation of mankind by our own hands.
Which leaves us with this final, powerful question to reflect on. If a superhero with the power to solve our global energy crisis won't step in to do it, what does that say about us? Are human beings a species that can learn to save themselves and their planet? Or are we destined to just helplessly wait on a Superman who is never truly coming to fix the core problem? Think about our own reliance on quick fixes for massive global crises the next time you look up at the sky. Thank you for joining me for this explainer of Justin Hart Crary's thesis. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.